wild hunt. Odin, as a wind god, was pictured as rushing through midair on his 8-footed steed, from which originated the oldest northern riddle, which runs as follows. Who are the two who ride to the thing? 3 eyes have they together, 10 feet, and 1 tail, and thus they travel through the lands. And as the souls of the dead were supposed to be wafted away on the wings of the storm, Odin was worshipped as the leader of all disembodied spirits. In this character, he was most generally known as the Wild Huntsman, and when people heard the rush and roar of the wind, they cried aloud in superstitious fear, fancying they had heard and saw him ride past with his train, all mounted on snorting steeds and accompanied by baying hounds. And the passing of the wild hunt, known as Woden's hunt, the raging host, Gabriel's hounds, or Asgardria, was also considered a presage of such misfortune as pestilence or war. The Rhine flows bright, but its waves ere long must hear a voice of war, and a clash of spears our hills among, and a trumpet from afar. And the brave on a bloody turf must lie, for the huntsman hath gone by. The Wild Huntsman, by Miss Hermans. It was further thought that if any were so sacrilegious as to join in the wild halloo in mockery, that they would be immediately snatched up and whirled away with the vanishing host, while those who joined in the halloo with implicit good faith would be rewarded by the sudden gift of a horse's leg, hurled at them from above, which, if carefully kept until the morrow, would be changed into a lump of gold. Even after the introduction of Christianity, the northern folk still dreaded the oncoming storm, declaring that it was the wild hunt sweeping across the sky. And oft times will start, for overhead the sweeping Gabriel's hounds, doomed with their impious lord the flying hart, to chase forever on aerial grounds. Sonnet, by Wordsworth. Sometimes it left behind a small black dog, which, cowering and whining upon a neighboring hearth, had to be kept for a whole year and carefully tended unless it could be exercised or frightened away. The usual recipe, the same as for the riddance of changelings, was to brew beer in eggshells, and this performance was supposed to startle the spectral dog so that he would fly with his tail between his legs, exclaiming that although as old as the Bamir or Bohemian forest, he had never before beheld such an uncanny sight. I am as old as the Bemir wold, and have in my life such a brewing not seen. Old saying, Thrope's translation. The object of this phantom hunt varied greatly, and was either a visionary boar or a wild horse, white-breasted maidens who were caught and borne away, bound only once in 7 years, or the wood nymphs, called moss maidens, who were thought to represent the autumn leaves, torn from the trees and whirled away by the wintry gale. In the Middle Ages, when the belief in the old heathen deities was partly forgotten, the leader of the wild hunt was no longer Odin, but Charlemagne, Frederick Barbarossa, King Arthur, or some Sabbath breaker, like the Squire of Rodenstein or Hans von Heckelberg, who, in punishment for his sins, was condemned to hunt forever through the realms of air. As the winds blew fiercest in autumn and winter, Odin was supposed to prefer hunting during that season, especially during the time between Christmas and the 12th night, and the peasants were always careful to leave the last sheaf or measure of grain out in the fields to serve as food for his horse. This hunt was of course known by various names in different countries of northern Europe, but as the tales told about it, all alike, they evidently originated from the same old heathen belief, and to this day, people of the north fancy that the baying of a hound on a stormy night is an infallible presage of death. Still, still shall last the dreadful chase, till time itself shall have an end. By day they scour earth's caverned space, at midnight's witching hour ascend. This is the horn and hound and horse that oft the lated peasant hears. Appalled he signs the frequent cross when the wild din invades his ears. The wakeful priest oft drops a tear for human pride, for human woe, when at his midnight mass he hears the infernal cry of Hola Ho. Sir Walter Scott. The wild hunt, or raging host of Germany, was called Herlothing, in England. From the mythical king Herla, its supposed leader in northern France, it bore the name of Helene A Guerber, from Hel, goddess of death, and in the Middle Ages was known as Cain's Hunt or Herod's Hunt. These later names being given because the leaders were supposed to be unable to find rest on account of the iniquitous murders of Abel, of John the Baptist, and of the Holy Innocents. In central France, the wild huntsman, whom we have already seen in other countries such as Odin, Charlemagne, Barbossa, Rodenstein, von Heckelberg, King Arthur, Hel, one of the Swedish kings, Gabriel, Cain, or Herod, is also called the Great Huntsman of Fontainebleau, La Grande Vigne de Fontainebleau, and people declare that on the eve of Henry IV's murder, and also just before the outbreak of the Great French Revolution, his shouts were distinctly heard as he swept across the sky. It was generally believed among the northern nations that the soul escaped from the body in the shape of a mouse, which crept out of a corpse's mouth and ran away, and it was also said to creep in and out of the mouths of people in a trance. While the soul was absent, no effort or remedy could recall the patient to life, but as soon as it had come back, animation returned. So that was The Wild Hunt, the 6th section of Chapter 2 of Myths of the Norsemen by Helene A Guerber, Odin. I will be working my way through this book section by section, and if there are any other public domain books that you would like for me to read, please leave a comment below. Thank you for listening, and have a lovely evening.